Alright, well here's what we got to work with. So first off, we've got our brand new headlight buckets here. Let me pull this out of the box in the bag. So what we'll do is we'll have to pull this apart so we can get at this ring here. That's what we'll end up attaching our halo to. Move that out of the way. Over here, then we also have got our brand new headlight. This is our Morimoto sealed 7 headlight that we're going to be installing here. We don't really need this right now, but I'm gonna have this out and handy just so we can kind of make sure everything gets lined up properly. So again, I'm just going to set this off to this side for the moment. And then here we've got a set of hardware to actually get the headlight installed into the new housing. This is part of the kit that we got from Wolfsburg West. So basically we just have the retainer ring to hold the headlight in, and then we've got the clips here. So let me just get the clips out. I only need a few of them for the time being, so we'll just grab 3 of those. We'll just set that stuff aside for now. And then here we've got our halo. So included with the halo, you know, obviously is the light ring itself, and then we've got the control box that will hook up to our Bluetooth controller. So this we don't need right now, so we'll just leave that in the box. We'll pull the ring out and we'll just set this guy aside. And for right now, what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and pull this bucket apart. I'm going to grab this ring because this is what we need to attach the halo to. It's pretty simple here. What we'll do is we'll just back off the 2 adjustment screws. Once those are out, then the bucket will just kind of flop out. So let me grab a screwdriver and we'll get this knocked apart. All right. So just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on here, this is the top of the headlight bucket. So if I grab my headlight, once that's installed, it'll be sitting like this. And so what we'll do here is we're going to take our halo here, and I'm actually putting the wire pointing up. So I want it at the top of the headlight. The reason being, when the bucket's installed, because we've got this these serrations in the glass here, that will actually kind of help hide the wire. What we're going to do is we'll make sure that the colored wires are all covered up here. We'll just put some black string tubing all the way up to the top, and then with the wiring up here, it's the most hidden from view. If I tried putting it down, which was my initial thought, you end up seeing it, you know, down at the bottom of the headlight. So we're going to put it up just to give it the best chance of being hidden. With the black shrink tubing in place, you shouldn't really notice anything. Now, some of the work we need to do here. There's a couple of issues that popped up when I was doing this. First, when you get these adjusters installed, once they get pulled, you'll actually see that they stick up above the surface of the bucket here. So when I put my halo on here, I can't actually set this down flush because these adjusters get in the way. So again, let me hook this back here, and now with that up in position, you can see how this actually sits way off of the surface. The other issue is actually with the wires themselves. When I lay this on here, the wiring gets in the way, and I can't lay it down flat because the wires make it protrude. So here's what I came up with to fix this. Little bit of work, but all in all, pretty simple job. I just made a couple of standoffs here. So I made 3 standoffs. They coincide with the 3 tie down positions on the rings here. And these are just pieces of steel. Now I machined these on the lathe, so they're all exactly the same size and the same length. But realistically, you could just take a 1/4 inch piece of steel, use a hacksaw, cut it to length, file the ends smooth, make sure everything is square, and then you'd be good to go. It'd be a little more work, but it certainly would work. So now we've got our standoffs. You kind of have an idea. If I just lay these on here, they'll be spaced out evenly here. Now when I set my halo on here, it's actually held up and off the surface, so it's going to clear both the wiring and the adjustment pieces here. So all in all, pretty straightforward, pretty simple job here. So here's what we're going to do first. When I get the headlight put in place, the top middle of the headlight is actually just off center from this alignment pin right here. It's not much, but it's enough. So when I put my ring on there, because I want the wires pointing straight up, they are going to be just offset, just to the right of this slot. So the wire is going to end up right in the middle, giving us the best shot of hiding them, so they'll line up with the ridges that are in that glass. So now that we know that that's what's going on, what I can do here is, again, we'll get this lined up. I'm going to find the center of the headlight, and that is actually right there. I'm going to put a mark there just so you know what's going on. So now I can get rid of the headlight itself. I don't need that right now. We just need the retaining ring. So now we'll grab our halo, kind of get this wiring pushed off to the side here. Now I'm going to line my wires up right where I want them, and get the halo positioned right where I need it to be. And now I'm just going to take a marker and I'm going to mark the position of the 3 tie downs here. So now I know where those 3 tie down points are going to be. So we don't need the halo anymore. We'll set that off to the side. And I've got my marks. Make them a little bigger for you. I got one here, one here, one here. And so that is where my little standoffs are now going to be sitting. Now, because the halo is just a little bit bigger, the ID of the halo is a little bit bigger than the ID of the bucket here. When I put my rings on, or when I put my standoffs on there, I want to make sure that they're back off the surface, so they're not going to be as visible once it's all assembled. So that's how we're going to manage getting past these adjusters and getting the wire to clear the top of the bucket here. The next thing we need to worry about is how are we actually going to attach these to the ring. And these are, pretty much non-structural, so they don't need to be, super strong, so we don't need to be worrying about welding or anything like that. What I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to solder it in place. So I just have some lead-free solder. This just happens to be plumbing solder. I've got some tinning flux, so it actually has a little bit of solder in it that helps to tin the surface and prep it for accepting the solder. And we're going to just solder these 3 lugs in place. They're going to be more than strong enough. I'm not at all worried about it. And then once we get the halo installed, everything's going to be great. But because this ring here is actually has some sort of plating on it. We want to make sure that we can actually get to a clean surface to be able to solder to. So first things first, I'm just going to take a Dremel with a little sanding drum on it, and I'm just going to gently come in and Dremel where the lugs are going to be soldered here. So I'm just going to remove a little bit of this plating, get down to some fresh steel, and then I'm going to go ahead and hit the surface of these lugs with the grinding wheel or the sanding wheel, just to make sure, again, I've got some clean metal. We'll hit it with some brake clean to make sure there's no oils or residue on there, and then we'll solder it up. So let me start by getting the surface clean, and then we'll get them all soldered up. And there we have it. You can see here this area here that's been cleared away. So now when I drop my lug on there, it's sitting on all clean metal. And so really all we have to do now is clean up the rest of them. Again, we'll hit the surface of this, make sure that that's clean. We'll hit it with some cleaner to make sure there's no oils on there, and then we'll get it soldered up. So just give me a minute to clean up the rest of these. Alright, so now that I've got my spots all cleaned up here, I am going to hit this with a little bit of non-chlorinated brake clean. Spray some of that on a rag here. Just make sure that this surface is nice and clean. We don't want to have any issues with our ability to get the solder to stick here. And then I will also clean up my little standoffs here. Same thing. I want to make sure that there's no oils on there. I know that these had some cutting oil from the machine work here, so we'll just hit that, clean these up real well. That takes care of that, and really now we're ready to go ahead and get things soldered up. So first things first, I'm just going to set down a board here to keep from setting my carpet on fire. Grab my flux. Again, this is just a tinning paste flux here. Grab my solder. And that is all set up and ready to go. And now before I go and get started on this, I'm going to put my halo back on here, get it lined up where I want it, and put my marks back, because the brake clean removes the marks I initially had put on there. So I just want to get this all lined up again. And these will kind of burn off while we're doing the soldering, but that's okay. They'll at least allow us to get the pieces placed where they need to be. Really, it's time to solder these in here. So I want this back from this inside edge about 1/16 of an inch, just enough to make sure that it's not going to be visible once the halo is installed. And so now we can go ahead and solder this up. Now, normally when I soft solder something like this, I would have everything clipped together and I would just feed the solder in. But I found that for this particular application, it's a little easier if I apply a little bit of solder to the part first. So first thing I'm going to do here is take a little bit of the flux, and I'm just going to smear that on here. I don't want to go crazy with this because it just makes a mess. But then we'll grab our standoff here, and I'm going to put a little bit of flux on there as well. And so now what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to heat the surface of the ring. I'm going to apply some solder to to the bucket ring itself, just a drop, and then we'll pick up the standoff, we'll heat that up, we'll heat the solder again, and we'll just drop it in place. And then we can kind of manipulate it where it needs to be, and then once it sets, it's good to go. All right, here we go. So I just take my little micro torch here, and again I'm going to heat the surface where I want the solder to go. Just put a little drop of solder there, that's all it takes. Now I'm going to pick up my standoff here. I'm going to warm that. Again, get that flux to flow. Go back, heat the ring. Drop our lug in place, and now I'm just going to press this down right where it belongs, and that's it. We'll just hold this for a second, wait for the solder to cool, and there it is, all done. So now what we'll do is I'm going to go ahead and get the other ones soldered on here. Exact same process. Once things cool off a little bit, I am going to double check the positioning. I'll lay my halo on there, make sure things are where I want them. Should I need to move them around, like this one looks like it might need to move in just a little bit, we'll get that all lined up correctly at that time. So let me go ahead and get these other guys soldered on here, and then we'll move on. All right, well, it's been about 10 minutes here, and I let things cool off, and then I just cleaned up all the excess flux, at least quickly with a dry rag, just to get it off of the surface here. So let's drop our halo in place, and let's see how we did. So we get that lined up, and my three, yeah, good to go. My three little tie downs line up exactly where I want them to. Once I get the halos centered, you can't see the standoffs. They're there, but they're not super visible, so we are we're good to go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to finish cleaning up this this flux. There's just a little bit of residue left on here, so I'm just going to warm it up slightly, wipe off what I can. We'll hit it with some soap and water, follow up with a little bit of brake clean, just make sure we got most of it off of there. And you don't need to see that, it's just clean up here. And then the next thing we need to do is figure out where we're going to actually tie these down. So let me clean off all this excess flux, get this thing ready for the next step. All right, well, I got everything cleaned up here. There's still a little bit of burned crud on there, but I'm not worried about that. That'll get cleaned up when we actually prep this ring for some paint here. But now we're going to go ahead and figure out the next step. So if I take my halo and set this in place here, again, it's up on the standoffs. There's these little tie downs here, and when I ordered these from the retrofit source, they also sent me a roll of this this tie-down wire. It's just a black tie-down wire. They have it in black and silver. I went with the black because that's going to go with our bucket color here eventually. And really what we need to do is figure out how we're going to actually tie this down. So what I figured out here is I'm just simply going to drill 2 holes in the side of the ring here. One is going to be pointing straight down, so my binding wire is going to go straight down, and then I'll drill another one right here on the side. So the wire is going to go down, back out. We'll loop it through the ring, twist it up, and that's what's going to hold it in. So it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward here. Now this binding wire is absolutely tiny, so I don't need a huge hole in order to drill through. And so what we're going to do here, the hole size that we're going to drill is this tiny, tiny little drill bit here. This is a number 57 drill bit, which is equal to 43 thousandths of an inch. It's just tiny. And your regular drill is not going to be able to spin this fast enough to drill nice and clean. So I'm just going to go back and use my Dremel here. And now I'm just going to go ahead and drill my holes. So it's a pretty straightforward process here. Just needs a steady hand. We want to get this really humming here. It's going to come into the side. And there we have it. You can see we've got our two holes here. So one going straight down through the ring and one coming in from the side. And now when I run my binding wire through again, it's going to go in the side, out the top, and then that's what's going to hold our halo on there. All right, with the holes drilled here, there is a little bit of tear out on the back side, so I just got this little triangular scraper thing here, and I'm just going to go in and clean these up, make sure there's no sharp edges. We don't want our wire to get cut on anything here. Now we can go ahead and actually get our halo installed here. So first thing I'm going to do is I want to actually cover up this exposed wiring, because that is going to be slightly visible. So I'm just going to grab some black heat shrink. We're going to just cover up this remaining portion. We'll get it bent around and put in the right spot, and then we should be all set to go there. Now, in order for me to get the heat shrink on here, I am going to have to remove this connector, which is not difficult. You just want to be careful with it. So we'll just depress these pins slightly. All right, so now that we've got the connector off here, we go ahead and slide some heat shrink on. And this is just large enough to fit over the ends here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take this, we're going to shove this all the way up onto here. With this pushed all the way up here, I'm going to do an initial shrink here with my little heat gun. For starters, we just want to get it down to size. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set this on the ring here. Kind of get things lined up. Make sure my wire sits nice and flat there. Pull this down. And now we'll just heat it. We'll heat it in place here, just so it'll kind of conform. And we're going to leave it right there for the moment. What I'll do here is get this bound into place, and then we'll do some final fitting. But at least we got the tubing on there for right now. So this should be cool enough. Yep, it's cool enough to move on. So now we can just go ahead and throw our connector back on there. Make sure we got it oriented the proper way. And this should just all slide right back in. Just push them in until they all click, and there we are. All right, it is time to go ahead and get this installed. So now I'm going to take my attachment wire here. I'm just going to cut myself three chunks. They're going to be a little on the long side, which is just fine. We'll just nip the excess after that. And first things first, I'm going to go ahead and get them installed in the ring here. So we'll go in the side, go out the top. Get this pulled tight. There we go. So now that's in there. I'm just going to bend that over for now so it doesn't fall out. And we'll just do that for the others. Now we can go ahead and drop our halo on here. We want to get that threaded through. Get that one threaded through. Get this last one through. There we go. So now we can set this down. And really, this is the fairly easy part here. We're just going to take our two ends and we'll twist those a little bit by hand. Let's do that to all three of them here. Alright, so now we've got things roughly in place. What we'll do now is we'll just kind of make sure this ring is centered. I'm going to take a small pair of pliers and I'm going to give this a twist here just to tighten things up. Now you don't want to overdo it on this with this wire. You put too much stress on it, it could break. We just want to make sure it's at a point where it's holding this in place. Now I'm just going to clip these tails. Now we can just take these ends and just bend them down and under the halo here. And there we have it. Now you'll notice it is still just a little bit on the loose side. Two things are going to help fix that. One, when I install this for the final time, I will just make sure I secure the wire so it's actually doing its job. But I am also going to be gluing it in these three spots. I will put some weather strip adhesive on each of these knobs. That way it'll actually be held in with the glue, and the wire is going to do some extra security. I don't need to do that now because I'm going to be taking all this apart so I can clean and paint, but that'll tighten things up at the very end. So it'll be glued and wired, and so we shouldn't have any issues there. Alright, now I'm going to go back to the wiring up here, and I want to make sure that this fits nice and flush. So I'm going to hold this down, grab my heat gun again, let this warm up, and now we can just warm this up. It's already shrunk, it's already the right size, but what we want to do is soften this up just so we can bend it around the corner and make sure everything looks good. So with that warm, now I'm just going to take my pliers here and I'm just going to hold that down tight like so. Give this a few seconds to cool off. And there we have it. That is now going to sit nice and flush. There's going to be a little bit of a pinch here where it passes through the bucket, but there's a lot of shrink tube on here. There's this nylon mesh, so I'm not worried about there being any kind of issues there. Now is a good time to actually see what's going on here and why we actually put these standoffs on. So if I take these little adjustment lugs here and get these hooked on here, you can see how they pull up out, and there's a bit of a step here. Well, now these standoffs give me clearance, and so there's no contact between the halo and this adjustment lug. You can see the same thing here with the wires. They come down, they're almost touching, but everything's nice and clear. So that again is the reason for having these standoffs. All right, well, let's go ahead and grab our bucket and get this put back in and kind of get it all finished off. All right, well, we got our headlight bucket here. We'll go ahead and get this installed. And so what we need to do here is we want to be careful of the wiring. So first things first, I'm going to get this little stem installed here. There we go. Pop that all the way through, and now we'll get the bucket centered up and pushed in. And you can see up top here that the wiring is sitting in here pretty tightly. But again, I'm not worried about it. There's plenty of shrink tube there. I may later come in and expand the metal just a little bit just to make sure it clears. But for now, I'm not too concerned with it. All right, so now I'm just going to go ahead and kind of pre-adjust the headlight a little bit just to make sure it's kind of in the right orientation. I think that's good enough for the moment. But now you can see what that looks like with the halo installed here. If you look up at the top, you can just make out where the wiring is, but it's not super visible. There's no colors poking through. It's just the black. So I'm pretty happy with that. Let's just for grins go ahead and drop our headlight in and get that clipped in so we can see what our final product's going to look like. All right, well, the headlight's installed. Let me get back the camera up here. And now, if we flip this guy over, there it is. So there is our Morimoto LED headlight and our Prism LED halo rings, and I think that looks pretty slick. Try to get this in an area where you're not reflecting everything from the background, but you know, that ring really kind of blends in nice in there. You know, transitions from the chrome to the halo, really not too terrible. Really, I think what we're going to do now is go ahead and get this put on the car, and you know, maybe kind of temporarily wire things up so we can actually see what this looks like. So let's hop over to the car here so we can actually see what things look like. Well, there it is. Really doesn't look too bad. A couple different views we'll show you here, and well, really that kind of wraps it up for today. So thanks again for hanging out, and really until the next one, I'll see you around.